My name is Maya Lane, and I'm 34 years old. I built a $22 million business from nothing but an idea and sheer determination. No college degree, just hard work and vision. And yet, despite financially supporting my family for years, my dad still called me a lowlife and cut me out of their lives entirely. Funny how, in some families, success doesn't always earn you respect. Today, I'm sitting on the porch of my beach house in Florida, watching the waves roll in, finally at peace with the choices I made. The journey here wasn't easy, but it was worth every tear and every triumph. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments. Hit that subscribe button and follow along as I share how losing my family actually set me free. I grew up in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, a place where traditional values run deep and college is seen as the only legitimate path to success. My father, Dean Lane, worked as an accountant at the same firm for 30 years. He wore his CPA license like a badge of honor and often reminded us, education is the only thing no one can take from you. My mother, Ivy, taught high school English and shared my father's reverence for academic credentials. Their mantra was simple: go to school, get good grades, attend a respectable college, secure a stable career. Even as a child, I sensed my path might look different. While my parents dreamed of raising a doctor or lawyer, I was busy selling handmade friendship bracelets to classmates in 4th grade. By age 12, I graduated to running the most profitable lemonade stand in our neighborhood, experimenting with flavor combos and figuring out what people would pay a premium for. It's cute now, my mom would say, but these little projects won't pay the bills when you grow up. High school brought more of the same tension. While I was busy selling custom-decorated phone cases and making enough to buy my first car outright, my parents focused on SAT prep and college applications. I maintained decent grades, enough to get into state university, but my heart wasn't in academia. It was in creating, selling, connecting with customers. Just get your degree first, Dad insisted whenever I pitched a new business idea. Then you can play entrepreneur if you still want to. To please them, I enrolled at State as a business major. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was studying business in classrooms while itching to build one in the real world. To help pay tuition, I took a job at a local retail store selling women's accessories. That's where it happened. I noticed a pattern in customer complaints about online shopping. The biggest issue? A disconnect between what women saw in product photos and what actually showed up in the mail. Then it hit me, a platform where real women with real bodies could see how clothes looked on someone with their shape before purchasing. The idea consumed me. I spent every spare minute researching, sketching, and building a prototype website. My grades started slipping as my passion took over. Halfway through junior year, I made the decision that would change everything. I sat my parents down at the kitchen table. I'm dropping out to pursue my business full-time. The silence was deafening. Absolutely not, my father said, his voice eerily calm. No daughter of mine is throwing away her education for some internet fantasy. My mother began to cry. Maya, please don't ruin your life. You're so close to finishing. But my mind was made up. The next day, I withdrew from my classes and used my tuition refund as seed money for what would eventually become Try Before, my e-commerce platform. The aftermath was brutal. My parents barely spoke to me, and when they did, it was only to express disappointment or to ask when I'd come to my senses. I moved out and into a tiny studio apartment that doubled as my office. It was so small I had to fold up my futon every morning just to make space for my desk. Those early days were a blur of 18-hour workdays, ramen dinners, and relentless drive. I built the first version of the site myself, teaching myself to code using free online tutorials. I convinced local boutiques to let me photograph their clothes on volunteers of all shapes and sizes, in exchange for free publicity. Each night, I fell asleep to the glow of my laptop, exhausted but exhilarated. 3 months in, the site went live. 2 days later, we got our first sale. Then another. Then 10 more. By month 6, we were processing over 50 orders a day. I hired my first part-time employee, a photographer named Tia, who believed in the vision as much as I did. At the 1-year mark, I invited my parents to see the modest office I'd leased. I hoped that seeing my dream take physical form might change their perspective. "It's nice," my mom offered, hesitantly scanning the space. My dad gave a stiff nod. "How much are you making after expenses?" When I showed him our books, we were already profitable, which is rare for a startup. He said only, "Let's hope it lasts. It's not too late to finish your degree." That night, I cried myself to sleep, not from sadness, but from frustration. I was building something real, something that made women feel confident in what they were buying, and it still wasn't enough. But by morning, I dried my tears and got back to work. If I couldn't earn their approval, I'd at least prove to myself that I'd made the right choice. Little did I know back then that success would only widen the rift between us, or that the daughter they considered a disappointment would one day become a millionaire. One day, I thought I might become their financial savior. The shift from scrappy startup to legitimate company happened so gradually, I often didn't recognize the milestones until they had already passed. One day I was working alone, and the next, I had 5 employees crammed into our tiny office space, our air conditioning barely keeping up with the heat from bodies and humming computers. Tribe's concept resonated deeply with women tired of the online shopping disappointment cycle. Our platform allowed users to upload their measurements and view clothes modeled by real women with similar body types. What set us apart was our real body approach. No professional models, just actual customers who earned store credit for modeling new arrivals. 18 months after launch, we hit our first major roadblock. Traffic had exploded, but our server kept crashing. We needed capital to scale, but fast. I pitched to 67 investors. Most turned me down. Many politely suggested I find a technical co-founder, a thinly veiled way of saying bring in a man who knows computers. Then I met Nova Clark, a female angel investor who had built and sold 2 successful tech companies. After our pitch, she said, "You've created something I wish had existed when I was younger. And you've done it without burning through mountains of cash. That's rare." Nova invested $500,000 for a 15% stake, valuing Tribe before at just over $3 million, a number that still felt surreal to me. I celebrated by upgrading from ramen noodles to actual groceries, and finally paid myself a modest salary. With Nova's capital and mentorship, we rebuilt the platform from scratch, adding features our users had been asking for. Virtual try-on tech, size comparison across brands, and a community space for styling tips and reviews. Our team expanded to 20 people, and we moved into a real office with conference rooms, a break area, even a kitchen. The press started to notice. First came local business journals, then fashion blogs, and finally, Fast Company, which profiled me in a piece on female founders disrupting e-commerce. Every media mention brought a flood of new users. By our 3rd year, we crossed $1 million in annual revenue. I bought myself a small condo. Nothing extravagant, but it was mine. I sent my parents a check to help with some long overdue home repairs. They cashed it without comment. At family gatherings, my father still introduced me as my daughter who didn't finish college. Never as my daughter who built a successful tech company. My mother would gently steer conversations toward my cousin's academic achievements, Ellie's law school graduation, Reed's medical residency. "We're so proud of you all," she'd say, eyes deliberately avoiding mine. At my grandmother's birthday dinner, an aunt asked about my business after seeing an article in her local paper. Before I could answer, my father cut in. "Oh, Maya just got lucky with that internet thing, right place, right time. Like those people who bought Bitcoin early." I sat in stunned silence. Years of sleepless nights, of teaching myself to code, of building vendor partnerships and customer loyalty, reduced to luck. That night, I stuck a note on my bathroom mirror. "Your worth isn't defined by their recognition." By year 5, Tribe had grown to over 100 employees. We'd expanded internationally, launching dedicated platforms for Canada, the UK, and Australia. Revenue reached $8 million annually, with profit margins that most startups could only dream of. Industry accolades rolled in. I made Forbes 30 Under 30 in retail innovation. We won a Webby Award for Best Shopping Experience. CNBC ran a feature on me in their Self-Made Entrepreneurs series. I sent my parents links to every article, every award, every TV clip. Sometimes they replied with a brief, nice, or congrats. Most of the time, they said nothing at all. At my high school reunion, old classmates approached me with admiration. My former economics teacher asked if I'd speak to his current students about entrepreneurship. To my hometown, I had become a local success story. Everyone seemed to recognize what I'd built, except the two people whose approval I'd always longed for. By year 6, Tribe's valuation had climbed to $15 million. We'd moved into a sleek downtown office in Cedar Rapids, complete with exposed brick, open floor plan, and the kind of industrial chic decor I used to dream about. My team included some of the sharpest minds in the country, many of whom had relocated just to work with us. I bought a house in a lakeside community, 20 minutes from my parents. It wasn't flashy by wealthy standards, but it was beautiful, peaceful. I thought maybe physical closeness would help mend the emotional distance. It didn't. Must be nice to afford all this without student loans, my father muttered during his one and only visit, gesturing around my living room with a view of the lake. The comment stung. But by now, I'd grown used to the subtle jabs. What I hadn't expected was how quickly I'd go from family disappointment to financial lifeline, and how little that shift would change the way they saw me. Not long after my father lost his job, my mother began experiencing severe migraines. Eventually, they led to a diagnosis that required specialized treatment their insurance only partially covered. I didn't wait for them to ask. I just acted. First, I paid off the remainder of their mortgage, $16,700. That freed up $1,500 a month in expenses. Then I covered my mother's medical bills and arranged for her to see specialists their insurance didn't include. When their 12-year-old car broke down, I had a new SUV delivered to their driveway. "We can't accept this," my father said stiffly when I visited. "You can," I replied, handing him the keys. "And you will. Consider it payback for raising me." He took them. What began as emergency assistance slowly evolved into ongoing support. I set up monthly transfers to cover their utilities, groceries, and insurance premiums. When their kitchen needed renovating, I paid for it. When the roof leaked, I replaced it. Around the same time, my younger brother Mark was accepted to an expensive private college. No one asked, but I covered his tuition, room, and board. For my sister Luna's wedding, I wrote a check that gave her the celebration our parents could no longer afford. The money flowed one way from my bank account to my family's needs. The acknowledgement, however, never flowed back. "The business must be doing well," my mother would murmur while depositing my checks, as if the funds appeared magically, not from years of relentless hard work. "God provides," my father would say at family dinners I paid for, somehow ignoring the role I played in that provision. At one holiday gathering, I overheard him telling relatives, "It's just temporary, until I'm back on my feet." Maya's doing fine right now with her internet shop. Internet shop, a $15 million company with international reach, reduced to a hobby. Luna noticed my expression and gently squeezed my hand under the table. "They just don't understand what you've built," she whispered. "But I do. It's amazing, Abby." That small acknowledgement meant more than she could possibly know. As Tribe continued to grow, so did my family's financial dependence on me. Dad eventually picked up part-time consulting work, but it paid a fraction of what he once earned. Mom's health kept her from returning to full-time teaching. I became the unofficial family bank, emergency funds, home repairs, car payments, even vacation money. And yet, in conversation, my business remained that website thing, or Maya's project. They accepted my money, but dismissed its source. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. At one Sunday dinner, after my father spent 20 minutes lamenting how kids today just don't value education, I finally said something. "Dad, do you realize my company now employs over 150 people? We're projecting $12 million in revenue this year." He looked up from the pot roast, purchased with my money, and smiled condescendingly. "That's nice, honey. But these internet businesses come and go. What happens when it disappears? At least your brother will have his engineering degree to fall back on." I pushed my plate away. My appetite vanished. I've been running this internet business for 7 years, I said. It's not disappearing. Don't get defensive, my mother cut in. We're just concerned about your future. The irony was almost laughable. They were worried about my future, while living on the success I'd built in the present. That's when I began to understand something painful. The financial support I gave wasn't bringing us closer. If anything, it deepened the divide. Their belief system, education equals success, couldn't accommodate the fact that my path, the one they had rejected, had brought more financial stability than theirs ever had. Acknowledging that would mean questioning everything they'd ever preached. So instead, we settled into this quiet, distorted arrangement. I continued paying the bills. They continued acting like I was just a lucky kid playing business. The emotional toll it took on me wasn't fully clear until everything came crashing down on Thanksgiving Day. Thanksgiving had always been a big production in the Lane household. This year was no different, even though I was footing the bill. The heritage turkey, the premium wines, the fancy table settings, I'd paid for all of it. I'd even financed the recent dining room renovation that now displayed my mother's antique china and crystal. The house smelled like sage and butter. Aunts, uncles, cousins, siblings, and their partners filled the space. I'd arrived early to help, glad for a rare day away from the office. Try Before was in its busiest season. Black Friday and holiday sales loomed, but today, family came first. I was in the kitchen, transferring rolls to a serving basket, when I heard my father's voice from the living room. He was speaking to my Uncle Philip, unaware that the heating vent carried every word. Sure, Maya's little company is doing fine now, he was saying. But she just got lucky with the timing. If it ever fails, she's got nothing to fall back on. No degree. No safety net. My hands froze. The casual cruelty of his words, delivered so matter-of-factly, hit like a punch to the stomach. Seems pretty successful to me, Uncle Vince replied. Didn't she win some big award recently? Anyone can win awards these days, Dad scoffed. But what has she really accomplished? No credentials. Just got lucky with a website. I set the basket down, afraid I'd drop it. My hands trembled. 7 years. 7 years of 18-hour days. 7 years of learning, building, problem-solving. 7 years of supporting the man now belittling my life's work. From the dining room, I heard my mother chime in. We do worry about Maya's stability. The internet is just so unpredictable. Not like Jessica or Mia, she added, referencing my cousins. She just finished medical school. Someone remarked about my cousin. You must be so proud of her. Oh, we are, Mom replied warmly. A doctor in the family, now that's something. Unlike whatever it was I had created. I moved mechanically through the dinner preparations, a strange numbness settling over me. When we finally sat down to eat, I found myself observing my family from a distance, as if I were watching strangers who merely wore familiar faces. People who had known me my entire life and yet still couldn't see me. Midway through the meal, during a lull in conversation, I decided to share something I had been saving. I have an announcement, I said, setting down my fork. Try Before won the National Retail Innovation Award last week, and I received an acquisition offer for $22 million. The room froze. A moment of stunned silence followed. $22 million? My brother Mark asked, eyes wide. I nodded. I haven't decided whether to accept yet. But yes, that's the offer. The table erupted in questions and exclamations. Everyone reacted, except my parents. My father continued eating, as if I'd casually mentioned the weather. My mother gave a tight-lipped smile that didn't reach her eyes. What would you even do with that kind of money? Dad asked finally, his tone skeptical, like he doubted I had a sensible answer. Well, for starters, I've been considering expanding into a new market segment, I began. Anyone can get lucky like that, he cut in sharply, setting his knife down with deliberate care. What'll you do when it all disappears? You're still uneducated. The room fell silent. Even the clinking of cutlery stopped. Dean, Aunt Mia said softly, clearly uncomfortable. But he wasn't finished. It's true, he went on. Jessica built something real with her medical degree. That's a future. This internet money? It's just temporary. I stared at him, something inside me breaking loose after years of silence and careful restraint. Temporary? I said quietly. Dad, I've been running this company for 7 years. I employ over 150 people. I've changed the way women shop online. We just worry about your stability, my mother interjected, sliding into her usual role as peacekeeper. Your cousin Jessica is a doctor now. That's forever. That comparison was the final straw. Jessica is brilliant, and I'm happy for her, I said calmly. But why can't you be happy for me, too? Why isn't what I've built good enough? Because it's not real, my father snapped. It's just internet nonsense that could vanish tomorrow. Not real. I felt a strange calm settle over me. Years of suppressed frustration crystallized into icy clarity. Is the mortgage I paid off for you not real? I asked, voice steady. Are Mom's medical bills I cover not real? Mark's tuition? This dining room renovation? His face turned dark red. How dare you throw that in our faces? We never asked for your handouts. They weren't handouts, Dad, I said, meeting his eyes. They were support from a daughter who loves her family, despite never feeling good enough for them. We never said you weren't good enough, my mother protested weakly. You didn't have to say it. You showed it. Every time you dismissed my business as luck. Every time you called it temporary. Every time you acted like it didn't count because it didn't come with a diploma. My father shoved back from the table, standing so abruptly his chair nearly toppled. I will not be spoken to this way in my own home. The home I paid off, I replied, barely above a whisper. His expression twisted with rage. Get out, he hissed. Get out, you lowlife. No daughter of mine talks to me this way. The word lowlife hung in the stunned silence like smoke. My mother gasped, but said nothing. My siblings stared in shock. I rose slowly, placed my napkin beside my plate, and said evenly, I'm a lowlife who built a $22 million company and supported her family for years. Interesting definition. I looked around the table at the faces of my extended family, frozen in the moment. Some looked ashamed. Others avoided my eyes. No one spoke. I'll go, I said. My voice was steady, though I was shaking inside. But let's be clear about why. I'm not being kicked out because I was disrespectful. I'm being kicked out because I finally stopped accepting your disrespect. I walked out of the dining room, past the foyer with the new hardwood floors I had paid for, and out the front door. In my car, hands trembling against the steering wheel, the tears finally came. Hot and uncontrollable. 7 years of chasing approval from people fundamentally incapable of giving it. 7 years of proving myself to those who had decided long ago that my path had no value. As I drove away from my childhood home, I didn't yet realize that this breaking point would become my breakthrough. That sometimes the most painful rejections lead to the most necessary freedom. I only knew that something had ended. And despite the sharp ache in my chest, I had finally stood up for my truth. That night, I checked into a hotel and sat by the window, watching snow fall on the parking lot. I alternated between tears and hollow stillness. My eyes were swollen by morning, but my mind was clear. I took a personal day, my first in months, and shut everything out. My phone had exploded with messages. From Luna, Dad was way out of line. Are you okay? From Mark, that was insane. Call me. Even from Aunt Mia, your father should never have spoken to you that way. But from my parents? Nothing. Around noon, I called Kira, my best friend and emotional anchor, now living in Boston. He called you a lowlife, she repeated slowly after I told her everything. Abby, that's not just disrespectful. That's cruel. I sighed. Maybe I shouldn't have brought up the money. No, she interrupted firmly. You shouldn't have had to keep hiding the truth of what you've built just to protect their fragile egos. I still keep finding ways to blame myself, I admitted quietly. Stop it, Kira said firmly. You stated facts. He's been taking your money while belittling your success for years. That's not love, Abby. That's exploitation. Her words hit like a physical blow. Exploitation. Had I really allowed myself to be used? But they're my parents, I whispered. I'm supposed to help them. Help, yes, she said gently. Subject yourself to emotional abuse? No. Her voice softened. Honey, would you let a friend, or even one of your employees, be treated the way your parents treat you? The question hung in the air. Of course I wouldn't. I had built an entire company culture around respect and acknowledgement. I had ended client contracts over how they treated my team, and yet I had accepted and even enabled this same dysfunction in my own family. Over the next few days, I tried to make peace. I called my parents home multiple times, left voicemails when they didn't answer, and sent an email letting them know I was open to talking whenever they were ready. I even drove past the house once but couldn't bring myself to knock. A week passed. Then, two. Their silence said everything. Meanwhile, the acquisition offer deadline approached. The potential buyers, an established retail tech platform looking to acquire our technology, needed an answer. The $22 million offer represented years of sacrifice, risk, and grit. It offered a level of financial security I had never imagined, especially coming from a modest, middle-class upbringing in the Midwest. I scheduled a session with Dr. Elise Wynn, the therapist I'd started seeing earlier in the year to cope with the pressures of leading a fast-growing company. But now, the stress was personal. Your parents have shown you exactly who they are and what they value, she said after listening carefully. The question is, can you accept that reality instead of continuing to chase the parents you wish you had? I hesitated. What about the acquisition? I asked. Part of me feels like if I take it, I'm giving up on proving myself to them. Dr. Wynn leaned forward. Maya, you've been trying to prove yourself for 7 years. At what point do you realize the goalpost will just keep moving? That night, I made 2 decisions. First, I would accept the acquisition offer. Second, I would use this as a turning point to create distance, both physical and emotional, from the toxic family dynamic I'd allowed for too long. The next morning, I called Nova Clark, my first investor and now a trusted board member. I'm accepting the offer, I told her. But I have one condition. I want to relocate the company headquarters to Florida. Florida? She asked, surprised. That's quite a leap from Iowa. I need a fresh start, I said simply. She paused, quiet for a moment. This is about your family, isn't it? I hadn't shared the full story of Thanksgiving, but she had witnessed enough over the years to understand the pattern. Yes, I admitted. I can't keep chasing their approval. It's never going to come. And it's affecting my mental health and, honestly, my ability to lead. You don't need my permission, Nova said gently. But for what it's worth, I think you're making the right call. On both fronts. The wheels were set in motion. The acquisition was structured as a partial upfront payment with a 3-year earn-out period. I would continue leading the division, now under their brand. Fortunately, the buyers already had offices in Miami and were open to the relocation. During the transition, my siblings began reaching out, each in their own way. Luna showed up at my office one afternoon, her eyes red from crying. I should have said something at Thanksgiving, she whispered. I'm so sorry, Abby. I hugged her tightly. It's not your responsibility to fight my battles. But you've been fighting for all of us, she said. The tuition, the wedding, Mom's care. You carried this family and they treat you like you're nothing. Mark reached out differently. He called one evening, sounding uneasy. Dad asked me for help with some expenses, he said. I told him to talk to you. He said he'd rather not. What's going on? Are you cutting them off? The question caught me off guard. I hadn't consciously made that decision. But in truth, I had stopped the automatic transfers after Thanksgiving. There'd been no formal announcement, just silence. I'm taking a step back, I said carefully. They can't treat me like I'm worthless while relying on me financially. That's not sustainable. That's fair, Mark admitted. But, Abby, they really do need help. The guilt rushed in like it always did. What kind of help? The property taxes are due. And Mom needs some follow-up treatment. I closed my eyes, the familiar weight pressing down. Part of me wanted to fix it again. To be the good daughter. The dependable one. The bridge. But Dr. Wynn's words echoed. At what point do you accept that the goalpost will just keep moving? I'll think about it, I told him. That night, I made a decision that felt both terrifying and liberating. I would no longer allow money to hold together a relationship built on invalidation. I drafted an email to my parents, since they still weren't taking my calls. I explained that while I loved them, I needed to set clear and healthy boundaries. I can no longer provide financial support to people who don't respect me or what I've built. If and when you're ready to have a relationship based on mutual respect, I'll be here. But until then, I need to step back for my own well-being. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Then I sat in the dark in my living room, quietly crying, not just for what had happened, but for what had never happened. For the relationship I had always longed for and never truly had. 2 days later, the acquisition paperwork was finalized. The first installment, $11.2 million after taxes, landed in my account. The remaining $10 million would come over the 3-year earn-out period if our growth targets were met. I was officially a millionaire many times over, and I had never felt more alone. That weekend, I boarded a flight to Florida to start house hunting. As the plane rose above the cold, gray Iowa skies, I felt something unexpected beneath the grief, a flicker of hope. Maybe by leaving, I wasn't losing everything. Maybe I was finally stepping toward what I'd been searching for all along. Not their approval. My own peace. The beachfront property wasn't the largest or most expensive on the market, but something about it immediately spoke to me. 3 bedrooms. A wraparound deck. Floor-to-ceiling windows that opened to the Gulf of Mexico. It was nothing like the practical, muted homes of my Midwestern childhood. This home was vibrant, open, unapologetically beautiful. It's perfect, I told the realtor after the walkthrough. I'll take it. The decisiveness surprised even me. After years of second-guessing every choice for fear of disappointing someone else, the freedom to follow my instincts felt dizzying and powerful. I closed on the house in January and immediately hired a local designer. No more beige walls. No more furniture picked for durability over joy. This home would reflect who I was becoming, not who I had been expected to be. Bold colors in the living room, I told her. And Luna and I want the primary bedroom to feel like a sanctuary. She smiled knowingly. Starting fresh? Completely, I said. While the house was being furnished, I turned my focus to the business transition. The acquiring company kept their promise to maintain our team's integrity, though about a third of our staff chose not to relocate. For those who did, I arranged generous relocation packages and temporary housing. Our new offices in Tampa were modern, filled with natural light, and overlooked the bay. The atmosphere was fresh and full of momentum. The parent company allowed us to operate independently, recognizing that Tribe's unique culture was part of its magic. By March, I was settled into my new home, and into a new rhythm. The constant sunshine felt symbolic, like a literal brightness replacing years of emotional overcast. I made a conscious effort to build a life outside of work. I joined a beachside yoga class, attended local business networking events, and even signed up for paddleboarding lessons, though I spent more time in the water than on the board. "You're overthinking it," the instructor, a laid-back woman named Bree, told me one day as I tumbled off the board for the 3rd time. "Your body knows what to do, if your mind would just get out of the way." Her words struck me in more ways than one. As spring turned into summer, my new life took shape. Mornings started with coffee on the deck, watching dolphins play in the surf. Workdays were focused but no longer all-consuming. Evenings were for beach walks, quiet dinners, or catching up with new friends. I also launched something deeply personal, a mentorship program for young entrepreneurs who, like me, didn't have a college degree. I called it the Unconventional Founders Initiative. We paired experienced business owners with promising, self-taught talent, those who had the drive but not the credentials. Education comes in many forms, I told the first cohort, and some of the most valuable lessons can't be taught in a classroom. The program gave me a renewed sense of purpose, offering the kind of support I once needed and never had. Communication with my family had become sparse. Luna called often and was genuinely interested in my new life. Mark checked in every so often, usually with updates on his engineering job or awkward mentions of our parents' continuing financial struggles. I held firm on my boundary. I no longer sent money. The guilt hadn't vanished, but it no longer dictated my choices. Then one Sunday afternoon, 6 months after the move, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened the door and froze. My mother stood on the porch, looking small and uncertain against a backdrop of swaying palms and tropical flowers. "Mom," I said, stunned. What are you doing here?" "I called your office," she explained. "Your assistant gave me the address. May I come in?" I stepped aside, heart pounding. She looked around the open concept space, her eyes landing on the turquoise accents and bold artwork. "It's very bright," she offered. From Ivy Lane, that was practically high praise. I made coffee, and we sat on the deck, the water glittering beneath the afternoon sun. Silence stretched between us, thick and awkward. Finally, she spoke. "Your father doesn't know I'm here." I figured. She twisted her wedding ring, a nervous habit I remembered from childhood. "We're struggling, Maya," she said softly. "The property taxes doubled, and my treatments still aren't fully covered." There it was. The real reason she had come. Not to reconcile, but because they needed money. "I see," I said quietly. "We're not asking for much," she added. "Just what you used to send. Before Thanksgiving." I took a deep breath, preparing for the familiar weight of obligation. "Mom," I said gently, "I can't go back to the way things were. Dad called me a lowlife. He kicked me out of your lives. Neither of you has apologized. Neither of you has acknowledged how hurtful that was." "He was upset," she said, her voice defensive. "You know how he gets." "That's not an excuse for emotional abuse," I replied. The term felt foreign on my tongue, but true. She flinched. "That's a harsh way to describe a family disagreement." "Is it?" I asked. "Would you accept a husband speaking to you the way Dad spoke to me? Would you tell a friend to stay in a relationship with someone who treated them like that?" She stared out at the ocean, avoiding my eyes. "It's different with family." "It shouldn't be," I said quietly. "If anything, family should treat us better than strangers, not worse. We're your parents, Maya. We need your help." The familiar guilt curled in my stomach like a reflex. I thought about the millions in my account, the life I'd built from the ground up, the comfort, the options, the freedom. Wouldn't a good daughter share that abundance? Then I remembered what Dr. Wynne had said. Support without respect isn't love. It's exploitation. "I can't help you financially while our relationship stays the same," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm happy to help you both find financial planning resources or connect Dad with some job leads through my network. But I won't send money to people who don't respect me or what I've built." Her eyes hardened. "So that's your ultimatum? Pretend we approve of everything you do, or you let us suffer?" I winced at the distortion, but I didn't back down. "That's not what I'm saying. I'm not asking for approval. I'm asking for basic respect. There's a difference." She stood abruptly, grabbing her purse with a jerky motion. "Your father was right. Success has changed you." "No," I said calmly. "What's changed is that I finally recognize my own worth, with or without your validation." Her mouth pressed into a tight line. "Well, I guess we know where we stand. Either help us financially, or you're not part of this family." The words hit like a physical blow, but somehow I stayed standing. "I already haven't been part of this family, not in your eyes. Not since I decided to live life on my own terms." She didn't respond. She just walked out, her shoulders stiff, her heels echoing against the tile. I watched her rental car pull away down the palm-lined street, then sank onto the front steps of the deck, letting the tears come. The finality of it all settled over me like a weight. She hadn't come to mend our bond. She'd come to reestablish a transaction. That evening, I walked the shoreline as the sky flamed orange and pink. The waves rolled in, soft and rhythmic, as if they knew how to soothe the parts of me that had been scraped raw. For the first time, I fully accepted that I might never have the relationship I wanted with my parents, and that by clinging to the hope of it, I was preventing myself from building the life I deserved. Sometimes, the hardest endings clear the way for the beginnings we truly need. As the final light slipped beneath the Gulf's horizon, I made peace with my choice. The family I was born into may never see my worth, but that didn't mean I couldn't create a chosen family, one that did. A year after moving to Florida, I stood on my deck with a glass of wine in hand, watching another spectacular sunset melt into the sea. I hadn't planned to turn that day into a reflection, but as the colors burned across the sky, I couldn't help but measure the distance I'd come, not just in miles, but in healing. What once had been sharp pain had softened into something else, a quiet strength, a calm understanding I now carried with me like a smooth stone in my pocket. Something I could hold on to, turn over, and remember, I survived this. I grew from this. The business continued to thrive under the new ownership. Our user base expanded by 30%, and our tech was now powering several of the parent company's platforms. I'd hit every year one earnout milestone, unlocking another large payment, but the most meaningful changes weren't financial. They were internal. After years of chasing outside validation, I had learned to trust my own judgment. Decisions came easier now. I didn't spiral into self-doubt or fear of disapproval. I listened to my gut, my instincts, and they were strong. I'd even begun work on a new venture, a hiring platform that connected companies with self-taught professionals. It was born from my own experience and from the Unconventional Founders Mentorship Program, which now supported over 50 entrepreneurs nationwide. But this time, I wasn't building to prove anything. I wasn't seeking applause. I was doing it because it mattered, because it felt right. My social circle had blossomed into a vibrant group of people who knew me not as the daughter who didn't measure up, but as the woman I had become. We gathered for beach bonfires, volunteer events, and lazy Sunday brunches filled with light conversation, shared stories, and laughter. There were no unspoken wounds, no quiet judgment. Therapy remained a key part of my life. Dr. Wynn had referred me to a colleague in Tampa, Dr. Sloan, who specialized in adult children of emotionally immature parents. In one session, she said something I'll never forget. The hardest part for many people is accepting they did nothing wrong. Some parents simply can't give the love or recognition their children deserve, no matter how perfect those children try to be. That idea that I didn't cause this freed something inside me. The shame that had clung to me for years began to loosen. Then in April, my phone rang. The caller ID surprised me. Luna. "Hey, stranger," I said, smiling. We talked often, but she rarely called during the week. "I did something you might not like," she said, hesitant. "Should I sit down?" "Maybe. I'm at the Tampa airport." I nearly dropped the phone. "You're here? In Florida?" "Surprise," she said gently. "I can get a hotel if it's not a good time. Don't even think about it. Text me your terminal. I'm coming to get you right now." An hour later, we sat on my deck, the ocean breeze playing with Luna's hair as she took in the view. "It's even more beautiful than the photos," she said. "I get it now. Why you love it here." "It's home," I replied softly. "So, what brings you all this way unannounced? Is everything okay?" She set down her iced tea, her face suddenly more serious. "I came to apologize in person," she said. "For what?" I asked, though I already had an idea. "For not speaking up for you at Thanksgiving and all the times before that. For letting them tear you down while I accepted your help with my wedding. For being a coward." Her voice wavered, eyes glistening. I reached across the table and took her hand. "Luna, you weren't a coward. You were surviving just like I was. But you were brave. You walked away. You demanded respect. That takes guts." She wiped under her eyes and gave a shaky smile. "I've spent so long keeping the peace, pretending not to hear the things they said when you weren't around. But it's not right, Abby. None of it is." I hesitated. "What do they say?" Part of me wasn't sure I wanted to know, but another part needed the truth. "Dad tells people you abandon them, that you stop helping out just to be spiteful. He never mentions calling you a lowlife or how he's spent years diminishing everything you've built. And Mom just backs him up. It hurt to hear, but not as deeply as it once might have. I was stronger now. I tried to defend you at Easter, Luna continued. I brought up everything you've done. Mom's treatments, Mark's tuition, the house. Dad accused me of choosing sides. Mom cried. It turned into a disaster. I'm sorry you're stuck in the middle, I said softly. I don't want to be in the middle anymore. Her voice sharpened with resolve I rarely heard from her. I want to be on the side of truth. That's why I'm here, to say I get it now. You made the right choice. Those words, you made the right choice, unlocked something inside me. A thread of doubt I hadn't even realized I was still carrying began to unravel. For the first time, I gave myself full permission to let go of the guilt. During Luna's 4-day visit, we talked more honestly than we ever had under our parents' roof. She shared her own battles with Dad's impossible expectations and Mom's emotional denial. I showed her my new life, the company, the mentorship program, the home I'd built not just with money, but with intention. On her last night, we walked barefoot along the moonlit beach, the waves brushing our ankles. Do you think you'll ever reconnect with them? She asked. I thought about it for a long moment. If we can have a healthy relationship, yes. But I've stopped hoping they'll change. That shift, accepting them as they are instead of who I wish they were, that's been the most healing part. You seem lighter, Luna said, smiling. More like you. I am. I smiled back. Turns out living for your own approval is a lot easier than chasing someone else's. The months that followed brought unexpected growth. My TED Talk, Redefining Success Beyond Credentials, went viral, drawing attention to both the mentorship program and my new startup. Messages poured in from people with similar stories. Your words gave me the courage to stop apologizing for my path, one entrepreneur wrote. I left school to build my business. My parents still tell people I'm taking time off. Your journey helped me set boundaries, without guilt. Reading those stories reminded me why telling the truth matters. My pain wasn't wasted. It had become a bridge. What I had endured was now helping others reclaim their paths. In July, I received an email from Mark. Dad had a mild heart attack. He's stable, but it was a scare. Thought you should know. I sat with the news, giving myself space to feel. The old version of me would have gone straight into fixer mode, booking flights, wiring money, offering solutions. But now, I felt compassion, not responsibility. After talking it through with Dr. Sloan, I sent a bouquet to the hospital with a simple note. Wishing you a full recovery. Maya. No money. No rushing home. Just quiet acknowledgement. And in that small act, I recognized how far I'd come. As the 1-year anniversary of my move neared, I decided to mark it with meaning. A celebration, not just of surviving, but of beginning again. I hosted a party at my home. Part housewarming, part milestone, part redefinition. I invited local friends, mentors, team members, and Luna, who promised to fly down again. That evening, laughter filled the air, the scent of grilled seafood mixing with a salt breeze. People from all corners of my new life mingled, connecting like pieces of a puzzle I hadn't even known I was assembling. After dinner, as dessert was passed around the deck, Luna tapped her glass. I want to propose a toast, she said, smiling at me. To my sister, Maya. A year ago, she made one of the hardest choices anyone can make, to choose herself after a lifetime of choosing everyone else. She walked away from conditional love and criticism and built something beautiful in its place. To Maya, and the courage it takes to begin again. Glasses clinked. Cheers rang out. I blinked back tears, overwhelmed by gratitude. Looking around at this chosen family, people who celebrated rather than questioned me, I felt something I hadn't expected. Homecoming. Not to a place, but to myself. Later that night, after the guests had gone and Luna had gone to bed, I sat alone on the beach. The waves rolled in soft and steady. From that shattering Thanksgiving to this quiet joy, the journey had been anything but smooth. There were dark moments, deep doubts, and days I wasn't sure I'd made the right call. But now, Sitting barefoot in the sand under a starlit sky, I knew with absolute clarity I wouldn't trade this peace for any amount of conditional approval. Some rejections aren't losses. They're redirects to the life we were always meant to live. Sometimes, letting go of what we thought we needed is the only way to make space for what we truly deserve. The family I created here, with intention, love, and mutual respect, had nurtured me in ways my birth family never could. And in that moment, watching the moonlight dance on the Gulf, I whispered a quiet thank you to my younger self for having the courage to walk away, not from family, but toward freedom.